It's my nerd world. Welcome to it, the Star Wars Reporter. On the show this week, talk a little Bad Batch. I liked this week's episode. I've liked all the episodes so far. I'm a little bit worried about our heroes in the show, but I'll share with you my thoughts. Plus, we'll do a little recap of all of the upcoming Star Wars projects, everything that's been announced regardless of whether or not it has a firm release date. Plus, I'll get into what I would do if I ran Lucasfilm. Also, if you have any desire, like I do, to see Poe Dameron's X-Wing from The Rise of Skywalker, I'm going to tell you how you can do that, and actually how I might even be able to do it too, which has me really, really excited. So, plus I got a lot more to get to on the show. Thank you so much for joining the podcast this week. Let's not waste any more time and get right to that galaxy far, far away.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My nerd world.
Just let it in.
It is the Star Wars Reporter, and I am your host, Jon Justice, here on My Nerd World. And like I said, I'm really glad you're with the show again this week. I've been listening to quite a few Star Wars podcasts over the course of last week, from last week's show, over the course of the week. And a couple of them have zeroed in on, well, a lot of them have, but they've zeroed in on those comments that J.J. Abrams made recently about having a plan and how important is a plan when you're developing these types of series and all that. And it's been a lot of fun listening to other people's takes on what J.J. Abrams said. And of course, you know, the continued divisions that exist in the fandom that swirl around the sequel trilogy. And we've talked quite a bit on the past few episodes just about that idea of when is it a good idea to have a plan, when is it not a good idea, how much of a plan was there for the sequel trilogy. And I think a lot of the opinions about having a plan, not having a plan, bringing in other directors really do kind of end up swirling around, at least the opinions end up swirling around whether or not you liked the sequel trilogy or didn't like the sequel trilogy. It was interesting for me personally, as I've talked about on the show a lot, because selling books is hard. I am an author. I have a science fiction space opera series, EMBARK. I am wrapping up book 6 in the series right now, and I only bring it up, apart from promoting my books, which are available on Amazon.com. I only bring it up because this wasn't intentional, but it was really it was really convenient and interesting that I'm writing book 6 and I'm down to the finale of the book, and I got kind of afraid of what it was that I was going to do, and where I was taking the story, and whether or not it would work. And as I was writing, I actually pitched off of an original idea that I had. And I was reminded, if you've watched The Jedi and the Director, which is the documentary for The Last Jedi, one of the most fascinating moments in the documentary is this really quiet moment between Ron Bergman, Rian Johnson's producer, and Rian Johnson, when Rian Johnson talks about the opening of the film. And for those that aren't aware, in the beginning of The Last Jedi, there was a completely different open. And they had actually done some animatics for that open, and those are available on the bonus features on the Blu-ray and DVD. But Rian Johnson's talking to Bergman, and he's basically saying how he doesn't like the opening and that he pushed it too far and he needed to change it because he thought it was too confusing. And I love the opening of The Last Jedi is one of my favorite openings of any Star Wars film. Just spectacular. But I found myself in a similar situation. So when I was writing the end of my story, I actually changed what I initially was going to do. And it was the cowardly thing for me to do. I realized it because I'm taking a risk, and I don't want to spoil anything for anybody that reads the books, but I'm taking kind of a risk in what I'm doing in this thick story leading into number 7, which will cap off this second trilogy in my EMBARK series. And I was finding myself trying to force the story to work to get out of a scenario that I'd created. And I hate pitching off when I spend that much time writing. It was about 5,000 words towards the end of the book, and finally I just said, I'm forcing this. I need to go back and do my original idea. Some people may hate it, but that's what I had originally intended to do, and it's way more challenging than the easy thing that I was going to do that I spent 5,000 words writing. So I pitched off those 5,000 words, shuffled them over to a blank draft of book 7, because there's a lot of good content in there I might be able to reuse, and then sat down over the course of the past 2 days and rewrote that section leading to the ending of the movie. And I'm really, really glad that I did, because that's exactly how this story should go, and I'm way more satisfied with it. So, again, I only bring it up because I find the conversations that people have around how Disney and Lucasfilm built those 3 Star Wars saga movies and people's views on what they would have done. That also gave me the idea to talk about that on this show. So, as we get into some of the news items here, there's not a lot going on this week, and I'll talk briefly about Bad Batch here in just a moment. But Entertainment Weekly, Andrea Towers put together this article about all the upcoming Star Wars movie and TV shows in the works. So I figured, well, you know what? It's been a while since we've kind of broken everything down in list form since they did that announcement. Oh gosh, I don't even know how long ago it was now. April of over a year ago, of all of the new projects coming up. So we'll run through the list of every Star Wars movie and TV series in the works. And then I'm going to share with you what I would do if I was a part of the story group, or if I was in a position of Kathleen Kennedy, or just a position of storytelling within Lucasfilm where I could go and dictate eras and the way these stories would go. I'm going to share with you what I would do if I was in charge of Lucasfilm. And then we'll talk about this really cool thing that's happening where you have an opportunity to actually go see the physical X-Wing fighter from The Rise of Skywalker, Poe Dameron's repainted, rebuilt, right? X-Wing fighter from The Rise of Skywalker. And I'll tell you how you can go see it starting next year. And I'm really excited about this because, thankfully, it's going to be at a place where I travel at least once every single year. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the show this week. At any point, if you want to email while you're listening, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, or if you're listening on YouTube, leave a comment there on YouTube, and I'll read them on next week's show. And just as a reminder, anybody who is enjoying the show on YouTube, but you're getting annoyed at the abundance of commercials, you can find the podcast on almost every single podcast platform. Just search for My Nerd World and the Star Wars Reporter, and you will find it right there.
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
So I'm not going to get into a plot point by plot point breakdown of the Bad Batch. I haven't been doing that on the show. A lot of shows are doing that. So if you're interested, just go search any number of the hundreds of Star Wars podcasts that are out there to hear the recaps and reviews of the episodes. I will say I am very much enjoying this series. Not just because it's the only new Star Wars thing that we're getting, but because it is just a really, really good series. This most recent episode, and I will talk spoilers briefly, we're clearly setting up towards the towards the second half of the season now, especially with what's happening to everybody's favorite new character, Omega, or Omega, if you pronounce it like she does. I still think that character is awesome, and I'm very excited to see what they do with that character and what kind of future Omega is going to have. When you look at what happened with Ahsoka and how big of a fan favorite she became, depending on what they have for this character in the Bad Batch, right? I'm very interested to see where they go with her, where they take her from here, especially given how young she is. They have such an opportunity here to craft further stories and have her get older, and then perhaps eventually translate that into live action. I would love to see a live action Bad Batch. I think that would be awesome. One of the things that sticks out, though, and something that came to mind when I was watching this last episode, and while I was out on my bike ride today thinking about recording the podcast this week, and then again, I'll go back to a little bit more of this week, so I have a few more comments about this week's Bad Batch episode. But I just wonder what is going to happen with the vast majority of these characters, and how is Lucasfilm going to deal with the fact that we have a slate of characters here that we're following. And we'll get into more of this, too. I guess this sort of relates to every upcoming Star Wars movie and TV show that we're going to talk about next. But, these are characters that we know, for the most part, don't appear in the sequel trilogy. So, Mandalorian, Ahsoka, I'm not going to repeat Din Djarin, but, all these characters that we've been introduced to post Return of the Jedi, pre The Force Awakens. I suppose the easy thing to do is to end their stories in the new content before we get any answers of what happened to them, right, in the sequel trilogy. But most of them, based off their ages, should be around at the time of the sequel trilogy. So I'm curious to see what happens to these characters. Now, that also rings true, and the reason why I bring it up for what's happening in the Bad Batch right now. What happens with these Bad Batch clones? What happens to Omega, right? Disney does this a lot. They introduce these characters into these shows that are wedged within existing timelines, that we have an abundance of storytelling that happens after the existence or the creation of this particular character. So, one has to kind of scratch their head. Okay, well, where are we going to go with this? They've done a good job so far when you look at a handful of characters, right? We still believe that if you followed Rebels, which was a fantastic show, if you followed Rebels, there still is a belief that we're going to revisit, Ezra Bridger. Spoiler alert there. In a point in time between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. We know that they've moved Hera Syndulla through the timeline of the original trilogy, and seeing the ghost show up in Rogue One, but then also knowing that what happens in the epilogue to Rebels, she's there post Return of the Jedi. So I'm very interested to see how Disney handles all of this. And like I said, it could just very well be that the way Disney handles it is they stop storytelling, right? So they don't have to explain what happened to those characters later on. And at some point in time, they can always go back and revisit. So Omega is one that I hope that we see further life from. I really like the fact in the Bad Batch that they bring in this character who is clearly a clone coming from similar circumstances and gene splicing and DNA splicing from Jango Fett, but it gives us a fresh new perspective of being a clone. Obviously the biggest one of her being a female, but we've spent so much time with the clones in and of themselves through different animation and live action projects that I thought it was a very, very smart thing to do, to bring in this new character, which could provide another layer to what we've seen in terms of hours of content of clones. This most recent episode of The Bad Batch 2 really stuck out to me because not only did we get this amazing return of Cad Bane, which I was so happy to see because I always loved that character in the Clone Wars. So it was rad that they brought him back. But some of the nods that they gave to the Westerns with the standoff between Cad Bane and Hunter, the in-helmet shot that we got of Hunter after he was wounded by Cad Bane, I used my 14-year-old son Kyle kind of as a gauge, and he was just swept up and swept up in this episode. He enjoyed it. He really did enjoy it that much, and those things stuck out to him just as they did to me. So I saw a comment up on Reddit right before I started the show this week too, of just somebody complimenting just how great the animation looks, and it really, really does look good. You do forget that you're watching animation. You're that swept up in the story, and I'm really, really excited for the rest of this, the rest of the season, and it makes me want more Star Wars. Especially when we've got, the Loki series going on, which I'm really enjoying, and I think that Marvel is doing some really clever things in their storytelling and where they're putting it in the timeline between Loki and WandaVision. So that gives me a lot of that gets me excited for the way that Disney is handling things, even though they don't give us a lot of details on stuff, just based off of what they've done with Marvel. So again, Bad Batch just makes me want more Star Wars, and so since we can't have anything other than that, as we wait for the Book of Boba Fett, we can just, talk about what's coming up in new Star Wars.
This is not going to go the way you think.
Now, that's relevant because the article writer, Andrea Towers, in this Entertainment Weekly article that I'm about to share with you, actually spikes in some purported rumor stuff from really bad sources, which surprised me coming from Entertainment Weekly. But let's recap this, right? And we'll just go right from Andrea's article here from Entertainment Weekly. When George Lucas opened up the curtain on a galaxy far, far away, he never could have imagined that his intrepid space film would launch a universe that included dozens of follow-up films, television shows, radio plays, cartoons, and theme park rides. Apparently, Rise of the Resistance, now that the parks are opened back up, is like the most popular attraction like ever. I don't know what they based that off of, but apparently Rise of the Resistance is like the most popular theme park attraction ever created. And I'm going to circle back to that because that plays into what I would do if I ran Lucasfilm. Star Wars content has never been in short supply by any means, but after the back-to-back releases of The Last Jedi and Solo, then Disney studio chief Bob Iger made the decision to scale back the theatrical output just as Mandalorian was starting production for Disney+. I'm going to be bold and say that's going to change. What we've seen so far in just a very short period of time as we come out of this last year and as things open back up is a rampant desire to get out and do things from the public in the few areas where we've seen places open back up, sporting events, from major sporting events to anecdotal stories like my father hosting family camp and it being the packed he's ever had it in years. Whether it's an event that we're going to in Washington, D.C. that we go to every year that was canceled last year, where they host a bunch of radio talk show hosts. The last time I went was in 2019, and they were at about half capacity. And when they announced that they were doing the event again this year, within a matter of days, they were at 80% capacity, probably going to fill up to 100% capacity. These are all anecdotal stories across different demographic spectrums that all point to me that people want to get back to their life, and I am of the opinion that movies are going to make a huge resurgence here very, very soon, and I would not be surprised that when that happens, Disney shifts some of their focus back onto movies more so than what they had. I think that the gap that we're getting right now is potentially good, although if it were me, I'd get a movie out next year, but we'll get to that. However, again, by the time we get to Rogue Squadron, I actually wouldn't, and I know this is going to sound really, really off the wall, I wouldn't be surprised if we got a Star Wars movie before that. I know that means they would have to start working on something now, but things are in pre-production, and that wouldn't surprise me. All right, let's get back to the article. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a ton of new Star Wars content to look forward to on both the movies and the television side. Lucasfilm has no shortage of properties debuting over the next few years. With the project works that stretch into 2023 and beyond, the slate is more massive than ever. All right, so let's run through the list here, since we have not done this in a while here on the Star Wars Reporter with My Nerd World. So the Book of Boba Fett we'll be getting this year in December. We're going to have to wait a bit before we see The Mandalorian and Grogu again. Maybe, but the timeline won't have to wait. The Book of Boba Fett picks up directly where the events of The Mandalorian Season 2 left off, and that means that likely cameos from Din Djarin and other Mando players, though the real focus here will be on fan favorite Boba Fett, who is finally getting a chance to headline his own show alongside bounty hunter Fennec Shand. Also bringing the Mandalorian touch is writer-director Robert Rodriguez, who directed an episode of the Disney Plus show in the second season. I think the book of Boba Fett, maybe this is kind of a given, but the Book of Boba Fett is going to serve as kind of a hub. I think the Book of Boba Fett is going to serve as a hub that potentially will, well, not potentially, it will. It'll tie into The Mandalorian. It'll tie into Ahsoka. It'll tie into Rangers of the New Republic. They still have it on the list here. I know there's a lot of people that have that show up in the air, but they still have it on the list here. But when you look at Rangers of the New Republic, Ahsoka, Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, Disney had already announced there would be the culmination of all these shows coming together into one big event. I think that the Book of Boba Fett is going to allow the opportunity to sort of serve as a hub for that. There was rumors going around a couple of years ago, shortly after before this list was released of all the upcoming shows, when we were just talking about getting The Mandalorian. There was talk of a show based on Tatooine that would circle around the cantina. And basically that show would serve as a hub of people coming in and out and going on adventures and us following them. I believe the Book of Boba Fett, that's what it's going to do. It's going to be, again, sort of the central hub where all these other shows offshoot from, much in the same way that Mandalorian Season 2 did. All right, next on the list we have later this year Visions, and we're supposed to be getting a preview of this in the next couple of weeks. But Star Wars Visions is Lucasfilm's foray into the world of anime. 10 short animated films by Japanese anime filmmakers that will bring fresh perspective into to a galaxy far, far away. I hope that we get some sequel era stuff with this. I'm not the biggest fan of anime or even like a fan of anime. I've enjoyed some of it. They did an amazing series of shorts because I'm a big Matrix fan. I'm one of the few people that actually liked all three of those films. But they did the Animatrix was a series of different of Animatrix or Matrix inspired anime that I really enjoyed, and I see Visions very much the same way. I will be more interested in Visions if they give us new content and new canon, right? Rather than just giving us a vision of things that we've had before. That's what I would be most interested in seeing, although I think it's going to be visions of stories that have come before. Next we have, going into next year, Andor. In 2022, no release date given. As a matter of fact, we have a few release dates, but everything else is mostly just years. Rogue One star Diego Luna will reprise his role as a rebel spy, Cassian Andor, in the character's standalone series. Andor, slated to be released in 2022. Few details have been released so far. Genevieve O'Reilly has been confirmed to reprise her role as Mon Mothma. Plus Stellan Skarsgård, Adria Jorna, Fiona Shaw, Dennis Go, and Carl Staller will also star. And this show seems to be very, very epic in scope. Andor, to me, is the sequel that Disney would have done had they been able to do it. Based off the success of Rogue One, right? Because why wouldn't you do some type of sequel to a movie like that that's so successful? Well, you can't, for one, because the sequel is A New Hope. But what you can do is a prequel based off some of the characters, especially because also the obvious, everybody died, spoiler alert, in Rogue One. So, to me, This show has a ton of potential because of the amount of money they put behind it. And they put that amount of money and effort behind it to not just shoot on the volume, but also physical locations because Rogue One was so popular, and they know that that is going to most likely be a hit show. Next up, Obi-Wan Kenobi, next year. Leading a show that feels like it's been years in the making, Ewan McGregor will finally return as Obi-Wan Kenobi in the new show set 10 years after Revenge of the Sith. Hayden Christensen also has been confirmed to return as Darth Vader. The series will be directed by Deborah Chow, who directed 2 episodes of The Mandalorian. Little interesting rumor on this. Heard some commentary, and it plays into a theory that I have said on this show, that you don't get Hayden Christensen back playing Darth Vader unless, 1, you have flashbacks, which is possible, but I'm not putting a lot of stock in that, or 2, you have him in the helmet and you show him. And I believe we're going to see him. I was listening to some other commentary, and I guess there were some people in the know that work on these productions, and more specifically, they work on the armor in these productions. And they had said that individuals who are looking forward to Hayden Christensen playing Darth Vader in the Obi-Wan series will be very, very pleased. And there is precedent for this. We know that Vader can live without his helmet. He's not wearing his helmet when the helmet goes on, and he seems to be doing just fine. He's not wearing the helmet in the back-to-tank on Mustafar in Rogue One, and he seems to be just fine. He's also not wearing it in The Empire Strikes Back when Captain Needa comes in and his chamber, lowers his helmet onto his head. He's out of it. So what I expect is we're going to see a very helmetless and burnt Hayden Christensen donning the armor of Darth Vader. Looking forward to the series like most people. I'm not an individual that was like, I must have an Obi-Wan Kenobi show. I like Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi just as much as the next person. I'm more interested to find out where this story is going to go. That's what interests me most. All right, Mandalorian Season 3 to be determined at some point. Most people are saying most likely in 2022 after the Book of Boba Fett has premiered. We'll get another season of The Mandalorian. Then we're moving into uncharted territory. So, I'm going to move one of these on the list because they stuck one in here that's attributed to films, and I want to talk about films all in one slot. So we'll move that, and we'll go here. All right, so we have Ahsoka to be determined when that's going to be released. One of the Clone Wars' most popular characters, made her live-action debut in The Mandalorian last year. Will headline her own series. Hot take on this. Probably not one most people agree with, but while I love that episode of The Mandalorian in Season 2 with Ahsoka, it is oddly not my favorite. I'm looking forward to seeing more Ahsoka, and I do very much enjoy that episode, but there were other episodes in Season 2 that I actually enjoyed quite a bit more than that one. That episode felt like more of a teaser to Ahsoka, even though we got a lot of Ahsoka in it, to what we can expect in the live-action Ahsoka series. And, it's a really good episode. But it to me, if you didn't have Ahsoka in it, it probably would have been one of my least favorite episodes. The pacing just felt, I don't know, just a little slow on that one. But still, not being negative, just saying, I love them all, and I've watched that episode who knows how many times. But just of all the episodes in Season 2, especially that very last episode, and then the episode where they end up falling in. Oh, the other one that actually, the same director that did the season finale, Peyton Reed, did the other episode where they fall into the ice cave with the spiders. I love that episode. Rangers of the New Republic is still on the slate. Expected to follow a band of X-Wing pilots set within the timeline of The Mandalorian. Will intersect with other Disney Plus shows like Ahsoka and help build a more comprehensive Star Wars universe in the small screen. I know there was some speculation that show had been scrapped, but there's no official word that it's been scrapped. So then we get to Lando, and there's very little known about Lando. Not even if it's a live-action show. We're all assuming that it is. Dear White People's Justin Simeon will develop Star Wars Lando, a new standalone series for the character of Lando Calrissian. So far, there's no update on who's going to play the smuggler. A lot of people are hoping for Donald Glover. I am too. But also given the fact that Billy D. Williams did a return for The Rise of Skywalker, who knows? My guess is it's going to be Donald Glover, and perhaps there's contract commitments for him that are keeping that from being talked about more often, but that seems to be the one we've had the least amount of details on. A Droid Story, a new animated feature that'll blend traditional Star Wars animation with epic visual effects by Lucasfilm's Industrial Light and Magic. Set to premiere on Disney Plus, and will introduce a new hero guided by the iconic duo of R2 and 3PO on a mission known only to them. I'm curious about that show. They've really focused on this traditional animation and epic visual effects by ILM, so I'm oddly curious about that show. Oh, by the way, Star Wars Droids is finally up and available if you liked that as a kid on Disney Plus. Then we get The Acolyte, and I've mentioned this before, and most recently on the Zing This podcast. The Acolyte's the show that I'm looking forward to, one of the shows that I'm looking forward to the most, even though we know so little about it. The new Star Wars series from Russian Doll creator Leslie Headland is a mystery thriller that will take an audience into the galaxy of shadowy secrets and emerging dark side powers in the final days of the High Republic era. It sounds dark and focused on the dark side, and I just think that that's unique and interesting and something that I would like to see more of. The Night Sisters in the Clone Wars are some of my favorite Clone Wars episodes. I just really love those storylines. So The Acolyte has me really, really excited for what that might entail. Now we get into the movie side of things. And so let's start off with the one that we know the most about. And what I like about what Entertainment Weekly did in this article is that they actually pulled the quotes that I talk about so often, but unfortunately, I don't get them just right, so I actually have them here. So Rogue Squadron is slated to be released on December 23rd of 2023. The next big screen Star Wars adventure will be Rogue Squadron, helmed by Wonder Woman director Patty Jenkins. Lucasfilm's Kathleen Kennedy teased the movie would introduce a new generation of starfighter pilots as they earn their wings and risk their lives in a boundary-pushing, high-speed thrill ride. The legend of Rogue Squadron has been long beloved by fans and will move us into a future era of the galaxy. Okay, so let's revisit those comments for just a moment. So Kathleen Kennedy's quote, again, was, the movie would introduce a new generation of starfighter pilots. Okay, so that's sort of a new generation of I know I'm being really specific here, but I want to break this down because I don't think I've done it on the show. So Kathleen Kennedy said this will introduce a new generation of starfighter pilots, not introduce a new generation to starfighter pilots, a new generation of starfighter pilots as they earn their wings and risk their lives in a boundary-pushing high-speed thrill ride. The legend of Rogue Squadron has been long beloved by fans and will move us into a future era of the galaxy. So, boy, one of the things you could say here, this move us into a future era of the galaxy, you could extrapolate that as a future era of the galaxy. No, I guess you couldn't. I guess the argument I was going to make is you could say that that's our future. They move us into a future era of the galaxy. But no, to me, both of those, a new generation of starfighter pilots and then moving us into a future era of the galaxy tells me that this would be taking place post The Rise of Skywalker. Now, if it does, and I really, really hope it does, I have to imagine that the storytelling in this is going to be laying the foundation for future projects and the potential of an episode 10, 11, and 12. So I don't want to wipe on that just yet because this is getting more into the territory of what I would do if I ran Lucasfilm. All right, so then we get into the untitled Taika Waititi film. After helming Season 1 of The Mandalorian and voicing IG-11, Taika Waititi will helm a story of his own. Waititi will direct and co-write a brand new film in the Star Wars universe, and that's all we know. Speculation, just speculation, has been that this would be something that takes place pre The Phantom Menace. I'm not so sure, to be honest with you. I think there's an argument to be made that if you're looking at pushing the timeline forward, Taika Waititi is the kind of guy that would do a really, really good job of doing that for you. Either way, I'm excited for this. I love what Taika Waititi does in terms of content creation. I think the dude is a genius. He's funny as all get out. Ragnarok, Thor Ragnarok is one of my favorite Marvel films. And the idea of him doing a Star Wars and balancing out that serious along with the mythology and then his just spot-on comedy, I just cannot wait for. All right, then we get into the untitled Kevin Feige film. Marvel's head honcho is taking on a new challenge, developing a film that he will produce for Lucasfilm and Disney. Little is known about the film that Feige is planning to create, but he tells Entertainment Weekly he's concentrating on just a Star Wars movie and not a series. Then we have the untitled J.D. Dillard Project, and this is the one that ends up taking a really bogus piece of news floating out there that had nothing backing it up and running with it, but I'll share it with you regardless. Slight filmmaker J.D. Dillard is working on a new Star Wars feature with Luke Cage and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. writer Matt Owens. It's rumored that the film will take place on Exegol, the hidden planet last seen in The Rise of Skywalker. There is no rumors of that. That was started by a bizarro commentary on Twitter, right? There is no confirmation that that's going to be the case, and I don't believe that's going to be the case. All right, and then we're to the Rian Johnson Untitled Trilogy. Back in 2017, Entertainment Weekly reported that Rian Johnson was being tapped to create an entirely new Star Wars trilogy that Lucasfilm says will be separate from the episodic Star Wars saga. So far, not much else is known about the project, but Johnson has still confirmed that it's in the works. And a lot of people speculated at the time, and I did too, and I think it's possible that particular spin-off film could be something that's post The Rise of Skywalker, or maybe something that runs parallel, but that does push the story forward. All right, so that concludes Andrea Walker's everything that is upcoming in terms of Star Wars movies and a TV in the works. So now let's move into, what I would do if I ran Lucasfilm.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
All right, so this is what I'd do if I ran Lucasfilm, and I want to hear from you. What would you do if you ran Lucasfilm? If you were in Kathleen Kennedy's position or a position to dictate eras, timelines, rollout releases, things like that, what would you do? TalkShowNerd at gmail.com. TalkShowNerd at gmail.com. So I won't get into all of it. I'm just going to kind of do like a broad, sort of a broad look at what a Jon Justice run Lucasfilm would be like. I would focus on theatrical releases in timelines on either sides of the prequel and sequel trilogy. And I would leave all the storytelling in between episode 1 and 9 to our live action or animation. So, anything from The Phantom Menace to The Rise of Skywalker, all the storytelling that takes place within that timeline, between 1 and 9, all that goes on TV. Everything else that's pre The Phantom Menace and post The Rise of Skywalker, they get theatrical releases. On the live action front, I want a prequel live action show. I want a series set between The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. There's a ton you could do with that. There's things that you could do with the Jedi. There's things that you could do within the Republic at the time, dealing with the potential emergence of the dark side. But we've spent so much time, and we've covered so much ground between episodes 2, Attack of the Clones, and subsequently Revenge of the Sith 3, and now we're spending time after episode 3. I would love to see a prequel live-action show series based between, again, The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. I'd also stagger my live-action shows sequentially. So since we are working on all kinds of different timelines of shows in between episode 1, well, essentially now we're dealing more with between. We've kind of wrapped up the storytelling right now for the moment, right, when it comes to the prequel trilogy. So now where everything is post-prequel trilogy leading into original trilogy and after the original trilogy, I would stagger all the live-action stuff sequentially. So For example, if The Acolyte is at the end of the High Republic, I would launch that show first. Then, assuming Andor falls next in the timeline, I would go to Andor. Then you go Obi-Wan and Lando, assuming that that's where they fall. And then, since we jump past the original trilogy, that's when I would go and release Ahsoka, Rangers of the New Republic, and then Mando Season 3. There'd be nothing I could do about Book of Boba Fett at this point in time, right? But that's what I would do. I would keep all of the live-action shows and the animated shows that fall within canon, the Disney, like Lego Star Wars shows aside. But I would stagger everything sequentially, just to make it easier for fans. So, when it comes to films, I'll tell you what I'd do. I would first thing out of the gate, if I was in charge, I would go against what everybody thinks, right? Disney and Lucasfilm have created all these characters that people love. There are aspects of all three films, The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker, even though there's divisions, heavy and large divisions in between all of those. There are fans that pretty much like a little bit about all those films, and there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of complaining of the characters as a whole, right? They've created all of this. So, on the movie front, the first thing I do, I go all in on episodes 10, 11, and 12. Right? I would, instead of running from the divisions in the fandom, go all in. Almost as if to admit, we know we can't please everybody, but we've got stories that we want to tell. And the saga of Star Wars with the Skywalker lineage, it's still arguably like the most important thing to Star Wars, right? Without that, you don't have anything else. Regardless of how certain things are more popular than other things right now, and I think you can argue The Mandalorian is certainly more popular as a whole than the sequel trilogy is. But rather than running from the divisions in the fandom, nah, man, go all in. Give us a story of Rey. As my voice cracks. Give us a story of Rey Skywalker, slightly older, dealing with carrying on the Skywalker legacy, attempting to train new Jedi, right, as a dark side presence emerges. Bring in Adam Driver as a Force ghost to guide her. Explore the difficulties of Rey dealing with having lost Ben Solo and seeing him as a Force ghost. Let's get into the depths of the Force. How long can one be a Force ghost? Let's explore what it means to keep and maintain balance. Heck, let's craft a story for 10, 11, and 12 about how there's a segment of the galaxy that's ticked off after finding out that Rey is the last remaining Jedi who took on Skywalker's name, and she's a former Palpatine. I mean, let's just do it. That, to me, would be the bold and brave thing for Disney and Lucasfilm to do, and you know what? It would be the most talked about. If they decided, we're going to do 10, 11, and 12, we're going to continue this story, build on the characters that we created, and bring in new characters and new conflicts. There's plenty of ways and stories. There's hundreds of stories that could be told that could continue to tell the saga of the Skywalker line, even though we've moved past these original players. And you can do it while keeping things fresh and not having to worry about preconceived notions, right? But I say play into the divisions of the fandom. Play up on what the fandom has been going through, and let's get into those controversies. Right? There's a lot of psychological stuff in there that could be really, really interesting to deal with Rey and the way that she might teach. And like I said, people finding out that she's a Palpatine who took on Skywalker's name. Man, that's the first thing I would do. If I was in charge, I'd walk into that boardroom and be like, look, we can talk all about this stuff. I want to talk about doing episodes 10, 11, and 12. Who do we get to write it? What are the visions for it? And on top of that, too, and I was listening to another show, and then we'll move on to how you can see an X-Wing up close and personal. But I would stop going back to the well of Ralph McQuarrie. And I would start drawing from Doug Chang and Ryan Church and the individuals who worked with George Lucas, who created such amazing pieces of concept art for the prequel trilogy. I would start looking at their unused stuff. Eric Tiemens, all of these amazing concept artists that have attributed so much to Star Wars. I would go back to all that prequel era concept art, and I would start pulling designs and concepts from there the way that they have with Ralph McQuarrie all these years. There is an entire generation of generations that have now grown up on the prequels, and that Doug Chiang artwork specifically means a lot to a whole group of people in the same way that Ralph McQuarrie's art meant to us as kids growing up watching Star Wars on the big screen when they first came out. TalkShowNerd at gmail.com. That is the email address, and I would love to hear from you on what you would do if you ran Lucasfilm. Lastly, let's get into this. You could say a giant movie star you could say a giant movie star of sorts has arrived at the famous Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. Margaret Whitenkamp, a Smithsonian curator who normally handles space-related pop culture items, like Neil Armstrong for President Button or action figures, hasn't worked on anything as big as this before. A full-size X-Wing fighter with a 37-foot wingspan used as a prop in Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. Lucasfilm has shipped the X-Wing, taken apart in about half a dozen large pieces. The wings were off and the pieces were laid out at the Virginia complex for the Smithsonian crew to start cleaning it before it gets reassembled and publicly displayed next year at the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum. For a Whitenkamp, she said, for any long trip, you would want to get it cleaned up. Seeing the X-Wing up close for the first time this month, Whitenkamp noticed all the little details, like one spot that looked like it was a little beat up. She could see scrapes. What the hanger rash was on the side of it, she wondered. Whitenkamp learned quickly it was part of the original paint since the... Let me back up. I worded that wrong. I apologize. Was that hanger rash on the side, she wondered. She learned it was part of the original paint job since the X-Wing wasn't meant to look pristine in the movie. It was detail that she says you don't see until you're up close. And then she had to make a point and say, okay, let's make sure we leave that alone. That's not something we're trying to fix because the X-Wing was weathered. News over the Smithsonian's exhibit broke last week on May 4th, which Star Wars fans, of course, know the May the 4th be with you day. It was a culmination of an idea going back to 2019 when Whitenkamp and her family sat a row over from a Smithsonian executive at the premiere of the last Star Wars movie. By the time Whitenkamp got home close to midnight, an email was already in her inbox. What could the Smithsonian do to capitalize on the excitement? That's when the phone calls with Lucasfilm began. So she said it was a bit complicated to get the request because these kinds of screen use vehicles are not easily available. Lucasfilm is rightly very careful about how they work with those assets as an active film company. Going in Whitekamp's favor, though, the Smithsonian and Lucasfilm do have a long history of working together. They did reach an agreement with Lucasfilm agreeing to loan the prop for free on a long-term basis because of the pandemic. Lucasfilm explained the logistics of the X-Wing and reassembling it back together over video conferencing. Finally, earlier in the month, Whitenkamp saw the Starfighter for the first time and admired the X-Wing's detail from top to bottom. The X-Wing was filmed in ground shots, she said. This is a very well-detailed vehicle on all sides of it, and that is not always the case for movie props very often. If they know that some piece of something is going to be away from the camera, they don't bother to make the decorating completely symmetrical if they know it'll be out of view. So this is a rare, wonderful example of really the fully realized vehicle where it is detailed on all sides. So, the fictional Starfighter will hang in a museum that already displays the famous historical aircrafts from space and travel to the Wright brothers' first powered flight over Kitty Hawk. To see the X-Wing paired along with real aircraft allows people to think about the creativity of design that we see in the Star Wars universe, and then the creativity of design that we see going on in the very latest aerospace builds for actual spacecraft and actual new airplanes. Look, I'm really excited about this. We travel to Washington, D.C. every single year for this Talk Radio Row that I mentioned. My only thing that I'm bummed about is I'm going to D.C. this September, and it's not going to be available to see yet, so I'll have to wait until next year. And I hope they don't hang it. I know she said they were going to hang it. I want it on the ground. I want to get up close to it. I love Poe Dameron's X-Wing from the first two films and from The Rise of Skywalker. I love the paint job on both of them. I mean, both of his X-Wings are probably my favorite X-Wings next to Luke's original X-Wing. So the opportunity to actually see the filmed prop version has me really, really excited. So I cannot wait. As a matter of fact, I may reach out to this woman, try to pull the old, don't you know who I am? No, but the bare minimum I can say that I'm a radio talk show host and I want to do a story on it. Maybe I can see it up close early. So I'm really, really excited about that. All right, that wraps up the show this week. And I had no intention of talking as long as I did, but I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. I also hope that if you haven't yet, you will head over to Amazon.com and search for EMBARK and Jon Justice and to check out my science fiction space opera series. With echoes of Robert Heinlein and Alan Dean Foster, EMBARK is part apocalyptic disaster and part the spirit of Star Wars in an exciting sci-fi epic. Follow 5 friends on a journey of survival from the Earth to the Moon, Europa, Mars, and beyond in this explosive space opera debut. 5 books available in the series right now, all available in ebook, paperback, and audiobook, produced and narrated by me. Books 6 and 7 will be out later on this year, and these stories are great for all ages. They're written for adults, but they are friendly for kids from ages 11 and 12 on up. So I really hope that if you're looking for some summer reading, this is the opportunity to go and check out my science fiction space opera series. I wrote it because of my love of sci-fi and disaster films, especially in EMBARK Book 1. Book 1 really does set the stage for the expanding space opera that takes place in the next 4 books that follow, and then books 6 and 7 that'll be released later this year. Also, if you are familiar with Amazon Kindle, if you use Amazon Kindle and you're on Kindle Unlimited, you can get it for free on Kindle Unlimited, and I hope you'll go and check it out. So again, Amazon.com and search for EMBARK, Jon Justice, or you can go to mynerdworld.net. All right, that's it. I hope that, again, you enjoyed the show, and we'll be back again next week. Until then, wherever you are, stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll talk to you again next week. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.